She dragged my elderly aunt into her house minutes later. 20 special forces stormed the neighborhood. Part 1. Some people don't understand what peace costs until it's stolen. For me, peace was a garden hose, a rocking chair, and my Aunt Rosa humming gospel songs on the porch as she watered her roses she nursed like family. Right in front of the house I bought her to retire in. And the person who stole that peace was a woman named Karen Wellington, HOA president, clipboard queen, power-hungry tyrant with a bob haircut and a badge she printed herself. But on the day she laid hands on Aunt Rosa, my aunt, the woman who raised me, I stopped being a quiet neighbor and became her reckoning. I had just flown in from Virginia that morning. My name is Cole Mathis, officially, Commander Cole Mathis, 1st Tactical Response Group, Department of Homeland Security. But I never bring that up in casual conversation. I don't walk around in uniform. I don't flash my clearance. My job is off the books more often than not. Most days, I keep a low profile until I don't. This time, I was home for a personal reason. Rosa had called me in tears 2 days earlier. She said my porch is clutter. My porch. Cole. That wicker chair is older than you. Karen had threatened to fine my aunt $500 for porch disorder and non-compliant aesthetics. That wasn't the first time. For months, she'd been citing Rosa with phony HOA rules. $100 here, $200 there. She once tried to report her to Adult Protective Services for growing tomatoes in the front yard. She's trying to scare you, I told her. You don't need to worry. I'll be there soon. I underestimated how far Karen was willing to go. That afternoon, I stopped by the house. Rosa had her wide-brimmed hat on, leaning on her cane, pouring water gently into a clay pot of begonias. You look good, I told her. You look tired. She shot back. Too much traveling. Sit. We sat. We laughed. We watched the wind stir the wind chimes. Then Karen showed up. She didn't knock. She didn't say hello. She marched up the driveway like she owned it, in those oversized sunglasses, tan slacks, and her HOA windbreaker. Her eyes skipped right over me, just another black man in a hoodie, and locked onto Rosa. I gave you notice, she snapped. You were supposed to have this trash off the porch by noon. Rosa blinked. Trash. That's my rocking chair. Non-compliant furniture. Karen barked. You're not exempt because you're old. I stood up. She's not trash. Neither is her chair. Karen turned to me, blinking like she just realized I existed. Who are you? Her nephew, I said evenly. Karen scoffed. Oh, one of those. Excuse me. You people think you're above the rules, but I represent this community, and your aunt is out of compliance. I stepped forward. You don't represent anyone. This HOA isn't even legally registered. Karen's lips curled. Do you know how easily I can have her removed for safety concerns? That's when Rosa stood up. You better get off my porch before I call the police. Karen exploded. She lunged forward, grabbed Rosa by the collar of her blouse, and yanked her. My world narrowed. I moved before my brain did. Let her go, Karen shouted back. She's in violation. I pushed her off. Rosa stumbled, but I caught her. Karen pointed at me, breathing hard. You just assaulted a compliance officer. I pulled out my phone, opened my encrypted app, and pressed code F6. A text popped up, confirm immediate response. I hit yes. Karen stormed back to her house, screaming, You'll see. You people always think you can cheat the system. Rosa sat down, shaking. Her blouse was torn at the neck. I held her hand. You're not alone. I told her. Not anymore. 6 minutes later, a black SUV rounded the corner. Then another. Then 3 more. Neighbors peeked out windows. Curtains parted. By minute 10, 20 Special Forces operatives surrounded the block, black uniforms. Comms in ear, standard issue M4s strapped tight. They moved like water, like ghosts. And Karen. She ran. She tried to slam her door, but it was already too late. They breached it like paper. I stayed on the porch. Rosa watched from her chair, stunned. One of my men, Agent Reeves, nodded at me as he cuffed Karen and read her rights. The neighbors started coming outside, phones up, recording. What's happening? Why are there federal agents? Is that for Karen? I stood, calm as the wind. Your HOA president assaulted a federal official's family member and impersonated a government authority. I said, she's not just being arrested, she's being exposed. What we didn't know then, what we would soon discover, was that Karen's fake HOA wasn't just a one-woman power trip. It was part of a fraud network that had exploited seniors, immigrants, and disabled homeowners across the county. And Rosa She had been targeted because she refused to back down. Now, the war had come to Karen's doorstep, and the next chapter was about to tear her mask off for good. Part 2. Karen screamed the entire way to the federal SUV. Not cries of regret, not even denial, just raw entitlement. This is illegal. I am the authority. You can't do this. I have rights. I have documents. She kept shouting until the vehicle door slammed shut, muffling her words behind bulletproof glass. But by then, half the cul-de-sac had gathered outside. Phones out. Jaws dropped. The woman who had fined people for leaving their trash cans out 5 minutes too long was now in federal custody. It felt surreal, but I knew this was only the beginning. Inside Karen's house, my team was conducting a full lawful search. A judge had issued a warrant the moment I activated Code F6, the emergency provision reserved for threats involving impersonation of government authority, especially those involving assault on family of federal officers. Agent Reeves handed me a tablet as I stepped through her foyer. You need to see this. Commander. The inside of Karen's home was meticulously arranged, not in a cozy, Martha Stewart way, but in a cold, sterile way. Everything had a place. Everything was labeled, and every surface was covered in paperwork. Boxes of it, binders, clipboards stacked to the ceiling. But what stopped me was the wall. A massive bulletin board covered in names, photos, addresses, citations, sticky notes in red ink, non-compliant lawn edge. Will crack soon, has immigrant relatives, vulnerable, old, weak, stubborn, pressure harder. Rosa's name was there too. My throat tightened. She'd been marked as a target, not a neighbor, not a person, a vulnerability. Pull everything, I said. Reeves nodded. Our cyber unit set up in her living room. Within hours, they cracked open 2 external hard drives and a password-protected laptop labeled HOA Master. What we found sent chills down my spine. Karen wasn't acting alone. There were wire transfers, small amounts funneled monthly into a shadow company called Civic Edge Community Solutions. Ostensibly, it was a consulting firm for suburban management. But Civic Edge had no real business license, no real address, just a P.O. box, a disconnected number, and a web of outgoing invoices billed to property violation resolutions, and the recipients at least 6 other so-called HOA presidents across the state. We'd stumbled onto a network, fake HOAs designed not to organize but to intimidate, exploit, and evict. I brought the evidence to Rosa that night. She sat with a blanket around her shoulders, sipping peppermint tea. Her neck was still sore, but her spirit untouched. She had other people doing this, she whispered. I nodded. And they've been targeting people who don't fight back. She set her tea down slowly. So we fight. The next morning, I met with DOJ liaisons and submitted everything we had. They confirmed it. Karen had been the central coordinator of a fake HOA ring, exploiting vulnerable residents through fabricated citations, unlawful fines, and forged threats of eviction. Using fear, shame, and fabricated authority, she and her cohorts had stolen over $600,000 in compliance penalties across 4 counties. People sold homes. Others moved under pressure. One elderly man pressured with legal threats had gone into a nursing home early. It was all by design. And now, it was going public. The press picked up the story within 36 hours. Federal agents bust fake HOA racket elderly, disabled, immigrant residents targeted. Karen Wellington identified as ringleader of a legal HOA enforcement group. Victims share testimonies of fear, harassment, and loss. News vans flooded Brookstone within a day. Neighbors lined up outside her house not to protest, to tell their stories. Mrs. Ibarra, the quiet widow on the corner, confessed that Karen had fined her $1,000 for a cracked flower pot and cultural clutter her altar candles during Dia de los Muertos. Mr. Riley, a Vietnam veteran, broke down explaining how Karen threatened to report him to the zoning commission if he didn't remove his flagpole. And when I asked him why he didn't speak up, she made me feel like I had no right. That's what she stole. Not just money, not just time, but dignity. That's what we were going to restore. With Karen's arrest and Civic Edge now under full investigation, the DOJ requested my help leading a task force to identify the other fake HOAs and initiate a federal class action lawsuit on behalf of the victims. I said yes, but I didn't do it as a commander. I did it as Rosa's nephew, because this wasn't just about one corrupt woman. This was about reclaiming every block, every porch, every garden, every rocking chair. Karen's mugshot was everywhere now, but the real justice wasn't her behind bars. It was Rosa on the front page of the Post, sitting in her rocking chair, smiling beneath her wide-brimmed hat. The headline, "She Fought Back, the Aunt Who Took Down a Fake Empire, Part 3. By the time the national news finished with Karen's story, fake HOA had become a trending phrase across every major platform. But no one was prepared for how deep the rot truly went. Because when Civic Edge collapsed, it didn't go quietly, it imploded. A week after Karen's arrest, my federal team served warrants on 6 other properties. They were spread across 3 counties, operating under names like Neighborhood Order Task Force, Suburban Compliance Watch, and Home Harmony Alliance. All fake, all quoting fabricated municipal codes, all with paper trails leading right back to Civic Edge Community Solutions. Each president had a similar pattern: target homeowners who were disabled, elderly, immigrants, or low income. Issue fines using printed citations, threaten legal action for non-compliance, push for voluntary property sales, split profits under the table with Civic Edge. It was organized extortion masquerading as community beautification, and now it was being prosecuted. The backlash came fast. News stations ran back-to-back exposés. Victims stepped forward in droves, many sharing heartbreaking stories. One woman cried on live TV as she explained how her autistic son was fined for disruptive behavior because he used a trampoline in the backyard. Another man, 84 years old, recounted how he sold his home after being fined weekly for excessive breathing equipment visibility. He lived with oxygen tanks. It was horrifying. It was real. And Karen had unleashed it. Meanwhile, Brookstone itself had become ground zero for a media storm. Journalists camped out by the park. Cameras flashed every time Rosa walked to the mailbox. People we didn't even know dropped by with flowers, letters, and thank you cards addressed to the lady in the rocking chair. She handled it with more grace than I ever could. "I'm just glad no one else will be dragged like that again," she said. But not everyone took it well. There were those who had supported Karen, people who liked the order, the clipped hedges, the illusion of control, even if it came from a forged title and an empty organization. Some of them were angry that their rules were now gone, angry that that woman and her military nephew had changed their status quo. One of them, a man named Ken Bradford, stood up in a town meeting and sneered, "Maybe we wouldn't need this crackdown if people actually followed the rules instead of crying victim." I stood slowly. I risked my life for this country so people could have a porch without asking for permission. I said, "If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you're the problem." The room fell quiet. Ken sat down, and no one backed him up. The Department of Justice officially designated Civic Edge as a multi-state fraud ring. Karen was offered a deal full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentencing. She refused. She still believed she was right, but it didn't matter. Because as the charges mounted, the other fake HOA leaders began flipping fast. One by one, they turned over emails, bank records, and internal memos proving how deep the rabbit hole went. Karen's name was on every major decision. She wasn't a pawn, she was the architect. The community had to grieve, not just what Karen did, but what they let happen. Brookstone held its first ever public accountability forum. It was raw, painful, but necessary. Mr. Riley, the veteran, spoke quietly. I didn't speak up because I thought I was alone, but we were all alone together. One neighbor, visibly shaken, said she fined me $800 for bird feeders. I thought I was just unlucky. I didn't realize we were prey. Rosa stood last. She didn't speak long. It takes more energy to pretend not to see than it does to help someone. So maybe let's stop pretending. The room stood in ovation, and a new chapter began. Brookstone dissolved the fake HOA and formed a resident committee, open to all, backed by the city, and legally accountable. We brought in urban equity experts and disability advocates to help reshape guidelines. No more arbitrary citations. No more fines without transparency. No more Karens. We renamed the park after Rosa Mathis Commons. She cried when she saw the sign. So did I. In Washington, I was asked to present before a federal oversight panel. My presentation laid out how easily small pockets of unchecked authority can metastasize into systemic abuse. Community enforcement, I told them, should never be built on fear. If it takes fake badges to keep people in line, then your community's already broken. By month's end, the White House released a new initiative, the Community Equity and Oversight Act, designed to prevent unauthorized HOA formation and require nationwide HOA registration with ADA compliance audits. Karen's story had become a national cautionary tale, and Rosa, she'd become a civil rights symbol. The last time I visited Karen's old house, it was empty, for sale. The grass had grown tall, the hedges wild. But in that chaos, I saw something beautiful. A small sunflower had bloomed by the mailbox, uninvited, unpermitted, and completely free. Part 4. The courthouse smelled like stale coffee and old paper, like every courthouse I'd ever stepped foot in. But this time, the stakes weren't foreign intelligence or tactical strategy. This time, the enemy wasn't on foreign soil. She was sitting 20 feet from my aunt, in a pressed blazer, acting like the victim. Karen Wellington. She didn't look like someone facing 12 federal charges: wire fraud, civil rights violations, elder abuse, impersonation of municipal authority, and racketeering. She looked like someone inconvenienced by traffic. But Rosa, she looked like a woman who had nothing left to fear. The trial had taken 5 months to prepare. The DOJ called it one of the most brazen examples of suburban fraud and targeted abuse in modern history, and Rosa was the star witness. We rehearsed her testimony gently, carefully. She didn't want a script, just clarity. I'll tell the truth. She told me. Let her lie. The courtroom was full, journalists in the gallery, victims in the back row, and Rosa, standing with dignity, cane in one hand, notes in the other. The prosecutor asked, Mrs. Mathis, can you describe the day of the incident? Rosa nodded. It was warm. I just watered my begonias. My nephew had come to visit. I was sitting in my rocking chair, same one I've had since 1981, when she came up and started yelling. Did she identify herself as a government official? Yes. She said she had the authority to remove me from my porch. What happened next? Rosa's voice didn't shake. She grabbed my blouse, yanked me forward, called me a nuisance, a hazard, said if I didn't comply, she'd have me removed for health and safety violations. Gas rippled through the courtroom. And who was present at that time? My nephew? She turned and gestured to me. I stood slowly, gave her a nod. Karen shifted in her seat. Rosa looked back at the judge. That's when everything changed. Karen's lawyer tried to discredit her. You never called the police yourself. Correct? No, Rosa said. I was too busy protecting my dignity. You claim the HOA wasn't real, but it had a website, signage. Rosa leaned forward. So does Santa Claus. Laughter broke out in the gallery. The judge banged the gavel. Order, but the tone had changed, and Karen was sinking. The next witness was a forensic accountant. She outlined how Karen laundered over $600,000 through shell accounts linked to phony HOA fines. An elderly woman named Ms. Jenkins testified she sold her home under duress after Karen threatened her with eviction. A disabled veteran shared how Karen cited him for decorative violations over his wheelchair ramp, then filed a noise complaint when he used the motorized lift. Every story stacked like bricks in a wall of shame, and every time, Karen's expression darkened. No apology, no tears, just defiance. Then came the final blow, a digital tech from DOJ's cyber team. He pulled up Karen's private messages uncovered from a wiped email archive she thought she'd destroyed. One thread read, "Find people who won't fight back. The lonely ones, the immigrants, the weak. We find them until they break." Another, "That old lady with the rocking chair needs to be taught a lesson." The courtroom froze. Karen's lawyer paled. The prosecutor turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this was not disorderly HOA management. This was targeted predation, prejudice, profit, and unchecked power wrapped in fake authority. She wasn't building a community. She was hunting it." The jury took less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the judge asked Karen if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood slowly. "I was trying to bring order," she said flatly. "These people don't understand what a clean neighborhood means. No remorse, just a dying grip on a crown made of paper." The judge, a black woman in her 50s, didn't hold back. "You assaulted the vulnerable. You weaponized bureaucracy. You masqueraded as law while violating every principle of it. Your sentence will not be light." She hit the gavel. 25 years in federal prison, no parole, full restitution, permanent ban from any civil or community leadership. Karen's face finally cracked. Not from guilt, from losing. Outside, cameras flashed as Rosa and I emerged. Someone asked, "Mrs. Mathis, what would you say to her now?" Rosa didn't hesitate. "I hope she finds peace," she said, "because the rest of us already have." Back home, the whole neighborhood threw a block party. No speeches, no banners, just music, food, and laughter on the sidewalks where fear once lived. Rosa danced with her cane in one hand, lemonade in the other, and I stood beside her, watching, breathing easier, because we hadn't just won a case, we'd rewritten the rules. Part 5. The Restoration Final 3. Untouchable words. A neighborhood can heal. That's something I never fully believed until I saw it with my own eyes. It doesn't happen fast. It doesn't happen with press conferences or sentencing verdicts. It happens the day you walk out your front door and see your neighbors smiling again. It happens when an old man plants tomatoes in his front yard without looking over his shoulder. It happens when the fear is finally gone. 6 months after Karen was sentenced, Brookstone felt like a new place. Not perfect, not utopia, just real. Alive in a way it hadn't been before. Gone were the fake HOA signs. Gone were the phony violation slips taped to door handles. Gone were the whispers, the side glances, the tension. In their place, a bulletin board by the park with announcements in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Weekly porch potlucks, where people brought food from their cultures and told stories. And the loudest, brightest, most beautiful thing of all, the Rosa Initiative. It started with a city grant. The mayor herself reached out after the trial, offering support for community healing. She didn't want Brookstone to just move on. She wanted it to lead the state in reform. So we built something new. The Rosa Initiative was a coalition of neighborhood leaders, seniors, disability advocates, and legal observers trained to spot abuse of power before it takes root. No more unchecked enforcers. No more self-appointed presidents with vendettas. Every neighborhood member could vote, attend meetings, and review budgets. Every HOA-like structure was now required to register with the state, prove ADA compliance, undergo annual equity reviews, include minority and disability representation on its board. We didn't just fix Brookstone. We gave the rest of the state a blueprint. Rosa didn't want to be the face of it. "I'm too old for speeches," She told me, let the young people do the talking. I'll be in the garden. But when she did speak, when she sat on a panel before the state assembly and told them what it felt like to be yanked from her porch by someone who called her non-compliant, the room went silent. And when she finished, they stood up, all of them. She's now the honorary chair of the statewide Neighborhood Integrity Commission. She still keeps her cane, but she doesn't lean on it much anymore. And me, I went back to work. Tactical briefings, quiet ops, red-eye flights into chaos. But something was different. For the first time in my career, I saw what domestic peacekeeping could look like. So I began consulting for DHS on civilian community defense, helping law enforcement identify early warning signs of HOA abuse, housing discrimination, and impersonation of civic authority. We created federal training materials with Rosa's case front and center, Karen's name banned from public boards, a permanent entry on the national HOA watch list. Justice didn't erase what she did, but it neutralized her reach. Then came the call from D.C. Congress wanted to hear our story. They were reviewing national legislation modeled after the Community Equity and Oversight Act, and they wanted us to speak. I flew Rosa out myself, upgraded her seat to business class. She made the flight attendants laugh the whole way. When we arrived, I stood beside her on Capitol Hill, and for the first time in my life, I let her speak first. She stepped up to the podium and said, "This country doesn't fall apart from enemies outside. It cracks when we stop looking out for each other inside. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who wanted to sit in peace and grow roses. And the only thing I regret is not standing up sooner, but I stood up, and now so will you." The Rosa resolution passed by a landslide. It mandates federal registration of HOA authorities, legal action for impersonation of civic enforcement, ADA training for all neighborhood governing bodies, emergency hotlines for residents facing HOA abuse, whistleblower protections for anyone reporting misuse of authority. Karen may have thought she was preserving a standard, but Rosa preserves something far more important. Community. The last scene I'll share isn't dramatic. It's not a courtroom, or a raid, or a press conference. It's a Sunday afternoon. Rosa and I sit on the porch. She rocks gently in her restored chair, same one Karen once called debris. Kids play across the street. One boy paints chalk murals on the sidewalk. Another waves a flag that says, "Be kind." Neighbors wave. Some stop to talk. One brings Rosa cookies. And there, under the soft hum of wind chimes, peace lives again. Never let someone fake power convince you they're stronger than truth. Your porch is yours. Your family is yours. Your voice is yours. Even if they call you non-compliant, even if they cite you, even if they try to silence you, stand up, speak out, show up. And if you ever need a reminder, just look for Rosa. She'll be out there somewhere, rocking steady, watching everything, and making sure justice has roots. The end, Surrey Morn.